Live. Welcome to the African History Network show right here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Tuesday, March 29th, 2022, and we are live. We're also broadcasting on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. All right, well, on yesterday's show, yesterday's show seems like a long time ago, but we talked about what happened at the Oscars and Will Smith going on stage and slapping Chris Rock, and more continues to come out. We'll talk about that some more tomorrow night on tomorrow's show. We'll talk about that some more tomorrow. We're not going to talk about it today. We're re-airing our Monday show on our social media platform, so you can go back and watch that. All right, so today at the White House, President Joe Biden signed into law the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Bill. The Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Bill. We've been talking about it here on this show. We talked about it passing the Senate I think it was in February when it passed the Senate, or earlier this month when it passed the Senate. We talked about it here on this show, and it was signed into law today. It is a historic bill. African Americans have been trying for over 100 years to get a federal anti-lynching bill passed, and it finally was signed into law today. So we're going to talk some about that. We're going to let you hear what happened. There was a ceremony at the Rose Garden at the White House today. So we're going to let you hear some of the comments that were made and some of what President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris had to say. But also the great-granddaughter of Ida B. Wells was there. Ida B. Wells was honored today at the White House as part of this ceremony. We know Ida B. Wells wasn't just a journalist. She was a crusader in the anti-lynching movement as well. Okay, Ida B. Wells Barnett. And her great-granddaughter, Michelle Duster, was there today at the signing ceremony, and Michelle spoke also. So we're going to let you hear some of what happened today at the White House. Now, also, there was, so we'll talk a little bit about Ida B. Wells as well and how she got involved in the anti-lynching movement. And this goes back to the Maafa store murders in 1892 at the People's Grocery Store, the Maafa store murders in 1892. Now, last week, we talked about Prince William and Kate Middleton going to Central American countries and Caribbean countries. And this dealt with the 70th anniversary of his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, being on the throne. Okay. And they went to Jamaica. We talked about them going to Jamaica. Well, Whoopi Goldberg is demanding an apology from the royal family for their involvement in, for Great Britain's involvement in slavery. Okay. Now, there was an article from the Independent, independent.co.uk. There was an article from the Independent back on, I think it was March 24th. And I posted that on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, and it got over 2,500 likes and got hundreds of comments. Okay. So we're going to, and I haven't had a chance to talk about this topic. We did talk about Prince William and Kate Middleton going to Jamaica and the Jamaicans demanding an official apology for slavery, number one, and two, demanding reparations. Okay, so we did talk about that, but I did not get a chance to talk about Whoopi Goldberg's comments. So I'm going to let you hear some of what Whoopi Goldberg had to say on The View. So we remember I think it was last month. I think it was in February, sometime in February. Remember, Whoopi Goldberg was suspended from The View, or January. Whoopi Goldberg was suspended from The View regarding comments that she made about the Holocaust, and the Holocaust not being about race, but being about man's inhumanity to man. We went through and broke that down here on the show and explained why it was the Aryan, the Nazis were perpetuating this myth of the Aryan race, and we dealt with all that here on the show. And the Nazis looked at the Nazis looked at the Jews as being an inferior race. Okay, so we dealt with that here on this show. But I think it's interesting that Whoopi Goldberg coming back after a few weeks from her suspension, and she was wrongfully suspended. She should not have been suspended for making a mistake. She apologized the next day. She apologized on The View, but the CEO of ABC just had it in for her and wanted to make an example out of it. But Whoopi Goldberg should not have been suspended. But here you have Whoopi Goldberg coming back from suspension a few weeks ago and making these statements demanding an apology as well. So very interesting. We'll talk about that also. Now, on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct your own behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man or woman's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his or her actions, because the mind can't do it, teach what it doesn't know. All right, I want to jump into this, and we'll tell you also about my online history classes I teach on Saturdays and Sundays. You can visit AfricanHistoryNetwork.com for more information, but we'll give you some information about that as well. So we're going to clip one when we come back from the break. Shakita from NBC News. If we look at this article here from the Washington Post, Biden signs bill making lynching a federal hate crime. Biden signs bill making lynching a federal hate crime. Now, the first federal hate crime bill, also the first federal hate crime bill they tried to get passed, goes back to 1900, and Representative George Henry White, who was African American. He was a Republican from North Carolina, and he was the only African American in the House of Representatives in 1900, because we had been voted out of office after these southern states, these former Confederate states, rewrite their state constitutions and impose poll taxes and literacy tests. Okay, and here is a picture of the signing today at the White House. All relatives of Emmett Till were there as well. Okay, you listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. Stand by. How's everybody doing? Okay, I'm going to try to broadcast on Instagram also. On Instagram. Let me see here. I had to get my second phone line, which is the business line, second cell phone. I had to get a upgrade today on the phone, so I'm still trying to figure out how to use it. But the second phone is better than the other one I had, so I'm going to try to broadcast from Instagram here in just a second. So you can follow us on you can follow us on Instagram also at Michael Imhotep on Instagram, IMHOTEP. So just a second, let me see something here. Back from break in 3 minutes. Stand by. Okay, Reese Colbert was at the White House today. Reese, Black Women's Views. I'll be back on Roland Martin Unfiltered on Friday, everybody. Okay, stand by. Let me fix this here. Okay, let me need to adjust the tripod. Damn. Stand by. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I think we're live on Instagram. How's everybody doing? Let me know if you can. I'm trying to broadcast on Instagram here. Just stand by. We're on commercial break right now. Stand by. Back from break in 1 minute. Okay. All right. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. Superstation, The Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Tuesday, March 29th, 2022. And we are live. Okay. I'm trying to see if we're actually broadcasting on I'm trying to see if we're actually broadcasting on Instagram. Looks like we are. Okay. And I had to update my phones today and trying to get this. Okay, so it looks like we're broadcasting. Those watching on our social media platforms, let me know if we're broadcasting live on Instagram. Okay, so right before the break, we were talking about the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Bill that was signed into law today at the White House. President Joe Biden signed the bill into law. We know it passed. We know the bill passed the Senate earlier this month. We talked about this here on the show when it happened. I want to go back to this article here from the Washington Post. Now, those on Instagram, you can also watch us on Facebook, The African History Network on Facebook, and Michael Imhotep on YouTube, because when we play audio clips, you'll be able to hear it on those social media platforms. Okay, and if anybody's watching on Facebook and YouTube, check us on Instagram and see if we're broadcasting on Instagram. All right, so I want to go back to this article here from the Washington Post. Shakita, we're going to clip number 1 in just a minute. Please cue it up. Biden signs bill making lynching a federal hate crime. So President Biden on Tuesday signed into law the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act to make lynching a federal hate crime in a historic first that comes after more than a century of failed efforts against racial violence. Comes after more than a century of failed efforts against racial violence. Now, President Joe Biden said today, hundreds of smaller bills have failed to pass over the years. Biden said at a ceremony in the Rose Garden after he signed the bill at the White House. He said several federal hate crime laws were enacted, but no federal law expressly prohibited lynching, none until today. So It's been the first time that they tried to get a federal anti-lynching bill passed. It looks like it was the year 1900. This is before the Silent March in 1917 that you've heard me talk about before. And the Silent March in 1917 was organized by um, James Weldon Johnson of the NAACP. And you had 10,000 African Americans marching down Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. And they were demanding a federal anti-lynching bill. But we can go back to 1900, and Representative George Henry White of North Carolina, who was a member, he was the only African-American member of the House of Representatives in 1900, because the state constitutions had been rewritten after Reconstruction ended in 1877. And you had the first state to have poll taxes was Florida in 1889. And then in 1900, Mississippi, at the Mississippi State Convention, they rewrote their state constitution to impose poll taxes and literacy tests to suppress, specifically designed to suppress the African-American vote in a state at the time that had a majority African-American population. So if we look at this article here that we've talked about numerous times before, because all this history is connected, okay, all this history is connected, and the people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past, in the present, and the future to meet the needs of the community. The Mississippi Plan to keep blacks from voting in 1890. The Mississippi Plan to keep blacks from voting in 1890. We came here to exclude the Negro. We came here to exclude the Negro. Is Michael Imhotep on Instagram? Okay, somebody said, well, what is it on Instagram? It's Michael Imhotep on Instagram. So this was the Mississippi State Convention. Now, what happened was that what happened at the Mississippi State Convention, when they wrote into the state constitution poll taxes and literacy tests, that became the model, became known as the Mississippi Plan, and that became the model that other southern states used to suppress the African American vote. The other southern states, South Carolina, 1895, Louisiana, 1898, okay, Alabama, 1901. They're going to rewrite their state constitutions also, and they're going to copy what Mississippi did. So this was and keep in mind, Mississippi also had the largest number of lynchings as well, from 1882 to 1968. Mississippi had 581 lynchings from 1882 to 1968. Okay, if we look at this piece here from now, I'll go to this piece from the Zen Education Project in just a second. Then we'll go to the clip of what happened at the White House today. The man who presided over the Mississippi State Convention of 1890, he was a white county judge named Solomon Saladin Calhoun. He said, to put the voting issue bluntly, he said, quote, "Let's tell the truth. If it bursts the bottom of the universe," he said, "let's tell the truth. If it bursts the bottom of the universe, we came here to exclude the Negro. Nothing short of this will answer. We came here to exclude the Negro." They specifically rewrote the voting laws in Mississippi and wrote it into the state constitution to suppress the African-American vote. Now, delegates eventually adopted a literacy test and a poll tax geared to suppress the black vote in a state with a black majority. The Mississippi Plan became the model throughout the South, part of a raft of racially oppressive Jim Crow laws that ended Reconstruction. Okay, so then if you look at this piece here from the Zen Education Project, Then if you look at this piece from the Zen Education Project, November 1st, 1890. This is when Mississippi's Constitution. This is when the Mississippi State Constitution was adopted, November 1st, 1890. On November 1st, 1890, Mississippi adopted a new constitution with a poll tax and arbitrary literacy tests for voting, sections designed to disenfranchise newly franchised African Americans and some poor whites. The new constitution was a nail in the coffin for Mississippi Reconstruction and a win for voter suppression. It brought an end to the period of democratic progress that followed the Civil War. Well, that had already ended basically at the end of Reconstruction with the Compromise of 1877, when Rutherford B. Hayes became president, and he agreed to remove the rest of the Union troops out of Louisiana, Florida, and South Carolina, so that the white supremacists could take back full control of the state legislatures. Okay, so by 1890, that was gone. That was gone by 1890. They had already started reversing this process toward the end of Reconstruction, but especially after Reconstruction ends. Okay, now the then what you're going to see is South Carolina 1895, Louisiana 1898, North Carolina 1900, Alabama 1901, Virginia 1901, Georgia 1908, Oklahoma 1910. All these states are going to rewrite their state constitutions and do the same thing that Mississippi did or similar things. And there's going to be Louisiana 1898 that implements the grandfather clause. Louisiana rewrites their state constitution in 1898 and is going to state that you can to determine whether or not you can vote. If your grandfather prior to 1867 could vote, then you can vote. But if your grandfather prior to 1867 could not vote because he was a slave, then you can't vote. And that and the grandfather clause was a way to get around the 15th Amendment of 1870 to the U.S. Constitution, which guaranteed the right to vote to African American men. Okay, so all this, so when you look at Mississippi, okay, all this history is connected. And then, as we talked about before, November 27th, 1955, all right, a few days before Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, December 1st, 1955, on that Cleveland Avenue bus, there was a meeting held in Montgomery, Alabama, November 27th, 1955. Dr. T.R.M. Howard spoke at this meeting, and Rosa Parks attended the meeting. And Rosa Parks talked about how when she was on that bus and refused to give up her seat, she had Emmett Till on her mind because just a few days prior, she had attended a meeting about Emmett Till and the lynching and his killing, because we know Emmett Till was lynched August 28th, 1955 in Money, Mississippi. Okay, you're watching the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation and Future Radio. When we come back from the break, I'm going to let you hear some of what happened today at the White House. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right, stand by. Okay. So we were live. Stand by. Stand by. All right, back from break in 4 minutes. Stand by. Okay, so we should be back on Instagram. How's everybody doing? And we should be back on Instagram also. Okay, now those watching on Instagram, you can also watch us on Facebook and YouTube. You can also watch us on Facebook and YouTube. And let me see something here. And this should reorientate. Hold on. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Tuesday, March 29th, 2022, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well. Okay, calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Now, if you like this type of information, also, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. And we have the information also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com as well, right on the homepage. So let's keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting. We're celebrating our 12th year anniversary of me broadcasting the African History Network show also. First broadcasted March 10th, 2010. And then you can register for the online classes I teach on Saturdays and Sundays. On Saturdays is Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Do that 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. On Saturdays. We do thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. And then on Sundays from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., I teach from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. So we'll post a link here also. All right, I want to go back to dealing with the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Bill passing today. Let's go to clip number 1. Shakita, this is from NBC News. Take it off mute. NBC Nightly News.
But a moment that has haunted the family of Emmett Till and the nation for nearly 70 years.
It's with you all the time. I mean, you can't forget that, you just can't.
In 1955, Till was only 14 years old, visiting relatives in Mississippi when he was accused of whistling at a white woman, then kidnapped, beaten, and brutally murdered. His killers never convicted. His mother insisting on an open casket so the world could see what had been done to her child. Reverend Wheeler Parker, the oldest child seen here with Till, is Emmett's cousin. Parker is the last living relative to witness the abduction. What do you remember about that moment?
I remember hearing the men talk about 2:30 in the morning. I said, we're getting ready to die. These people are going to kill us.
Today, Reverend Parker was at the White House to bear witness once again, this time history being made in his cousin's name.
I just signed into law the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act.
President Biden signed the first law that makes lynching a federal hate crime, passed unanimously in the Senate this month.
Racial hate isn't an old problem. It's a persistent problem.
Congress had tried and failed to pass anti-lynching laws nearly 200 times for more than a century. The Emmett Till law imposes a prison term of up to 30 years on a person who commits a hate crime that results in death, serious injury, or that includes kidnapping, sexual abuse, or attempt to kill. And lawmakers who worked on the bill say it would apply to cases like the 2020 killing of Ahmaud Arbery, the 25-year-old black man who was killed by 3 white men. Arbery's killers were all convicted of federal hate crimes.
It took 100 years, over 100 years, but it tells us that there's hope.
Today's signing, a testament to a teenager never forgotten, a step forward in civil rights, long overdue. Kristen Welker, NBC News, the White House.
Okay, so it took over 100 years. We're going to clip 2 in just a second. Shakita queued up at the 126 mark. That's right from the White House. It took 100 years, over 100 years, for that bill to be passed and signed into law. Okay, and you heard one of Emmett Till's relatives there, Wheeler, Reverend Wheeler, who was with Emmett Till when he was abducted also. Okay, you heard him there in that clip. He was at the White House today as well. All right, I want to go to this next clip. So this is from the Rose Garden in the White House today, and you're going to hear President Joe Biden right after he signed the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Bill. And you're also going to hear from, I think you're going to hear from Vice President Kamala Harris in this clip as well. Let's go to this clip, Shakita.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I just signed into law the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, making lynching a federal hate crime for the first time in American history. I want to thank Vice President Harris, who was the key co-sponsor of this bill when she was a United States Senator. I also want to thank Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer and members of the Congress here today, especially Congressman Hoyer, Bobby Rush, Senator Dick Durbin, and Cory Booker. I also want to thank Senator Tim Scott, who couldn't be here today. And the civil rights leaders gather here today, and most of all, the family of Emmett Till.
Pause it for just a second. Okay, so hold on. Senator Tim Scott probably would have been the only Republican there. Senator Tim Scott helped get the bill passed. Senator Tim Scott wasn't there. Okay, I think that was. I don't think Senator Tim Scott had something better to do. Republican, Black Tea Party Republican from South Carolina. I think he probably would have been the only Republican there, or prominent Republican, and he didn't want to be there because Tim Scott wants to run for president, and he didn't want to be there with the Democrats. Okay, it's just very strange. Tim Scott wasn't there. I bet you if Mitch McConnell was there, Tim Scott would have showed up. Let's go back to this clip.
Matter of fact, Granddaughter told me that her mother was here when? And your grandmother was here when?
1898.
In 1898, in order to make a case for the anti-lynching law.
Ida B. Wells.
It was over 100 years ago in 1900. North Carolina Representative George Henry White, the son of a slave, the only black lawmaker in Congress at the time, who first introduced legislation to make lynching a federal crime. Hundreds of similar bills have failed to pass. Over the years, several federal hate crime laws were enacted, including one I signed last year to combat COVID-19 hate crimes. But no federal law expressly prohibited lynching. None. Until today. One of the leading chronicles of our history of the lynching is Brian Stevenson, who happens to be a Delawarean from my home state, who wanted very much to be here today, but he could not. He helped build a National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama, America's first site dedicated to understanding the legacy of lynching. You know, his extensive research showed that between 1877 and 1950, more than 4,400 black people were murdered by lynching, most in the South, but some in the North as well. That's a lot of folks, man, and a lot of silence for a long time. Lynching was pure terror to enforce the lie that not everyone belongs in America, not everyone is created equal. Terror to systematically undermine hard-fought civil rights. Terror not just in the dark of the night, but in broad daylight. Innocent men, women, and children hung by nooses from trees, bodies burned and drowned and castrated. Their crimes? Trying to vote, trying to go to school, trying to own a business or preach the gospel. False accusations of murder, arson, and robbery. Simply being black. Often the crowds of white families gathered to celebrate the spectacle, taking pictures of the bodies and mailing them as postcards. Emmett Till was an only child. He grew up in the south side of Chicago with his mother Mamie and grandparents and cousins. In the summer of 1955, Emmett turned 14 years old, ready to start 8th grade in the fall. Before school started, he wanted to visit his cousins in Mississippi. So Emmett's mom dropped him off at the train station in Chicago. Her own family fled the Delta decades earlier. So she told him the unwritten rules he had to follow. Quote, be very careful how you speak. Say yes, sir, and no, ma'am. And do not hesitate to humble yourself if you have to get down on your knees. End of quote. That same speech, that same admonition, too many black parents today still have to use that admonition. They have to tell their children when it comes to encounters with the law enforcement, and so many other circumstances. She kissed Emmett goodbye. It was the last time she saw her son alive. Days after he arrived in Mississippi, Emmett's mutilated body was found in the river. Barbed wire tied around his neck and a 75-pound cotton gin fan attached to that wire as he's thrown into the river. Emmett's his mother demanded that her son be sent home so that his funeral in Chicago could be an open casket. Here's what she said. Let the people see what I've seen. America and the world saw what she saw. Emmett Till was born nearly 40 years ago, after the first anti-lynching law was introduced. Although he was one of thousands who were lynched, his mother's courage to show the world what was done to him energized the civil rights movement. Exactly 100 days later, Rosa Parks was arrested on the bus in Montgomery. Her statue sits in my office. She said, I thought of Emmett Till and I couldn't go back. I thought of Emmett Till and I couldn't go back. Dr. King often preached about, quote, the crying voices of little Emmett Till screaming from the rushes of the Mississippi. To the Till family, we remain in awe of your courage to find purpose through your pain. To find purpose through your pain. But the law is not just about the past. It's about the present and our future as well. From the bullets in the back of Ahmaud Arbery to countless other acts of violence, countless victims known and unknown, the same racial hatred that drove the mob to hang a noose brought that mob.
Okay, we're going to pause it right there. We'll continue this on the other side of the break. Listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. Now, where else did you see coverage of this? I know Roland Martin. We shared Roland Martin live today when he aired it live from the Rose Garden. But like, who else is like really talking about this today and giving you background history? Listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Back from break in 4 minutes. Stand by. Stand by. How's everybody doing? All right. Back from break in 3 minutes. All right, who still needs to register for the online history classes I teach on Saturdays and Sundays? On Sunday, I teach from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. We go through and deal with a lot of this history, okay? And we go pretty much in depth. Each class we go through and analyze a 10 to 20-year period of history. Then on Saturday, I teach ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. I'm going to post a link here. We have a bundle pack. You can register for both classes for only $100. That's a $260 value. Back from break in 2 minutes. Stand by. Those watching on Instagram, you can also watch us on Facebook at The African History Network on Facebook, The African History Network on Facebook, and my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep, and you'll be able to hear the audio. I had to upgrade my business line for my cell phone, so it's a better phone. So I'm broadcasting from Instagram, but I'm still working some stuff out. I'm still trying to figure this phone out. I just got it today. And then also we're going to upload this full video to Instagram as well. Okay, back from break in 2 minutes. We're on commercial break here at the radio station. If you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network. $ the AHN show through Cash App. $ the AHN show through Cash App. Also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. Back from break in 1 minute. All right. Be sure to follow us on our Instagram page as well. It's Michael Imhotep on Instagram. IMHOTEP. I don't use Instagram a whole lot, but I'm trying to use it more. Back from break in 1 minute. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. Okay, we're going back to that clip in just a second, Shakita. And everybody check out the article here from zeneducationproject.org. Now, we deal with this type of information in depth in the online history classes I teach on Saturdays and Sundays, especially my Sunday class, where we deal with the civil rights movement. We deal with history from 1803 through 1968. November 27th, 1955, Rosa Parks attends a meeting about Emmett Till. November 27th, 1955, Rosa Parks attends a meeting about Emmett Till. And at this meeting, Dr. T.R.M. Howard spoke. On November 27th, so we know Emmett Till was lynched August 28th, 1955. On November 27th, 1955, Rosa Parks attended a packed mass meeting at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church to hear Dr. T.R.M. Howard speak. Dr. Howard was the lead organizer in the Emmett Till case, the 14-year-old Chicago boy who had been tortured and murdered near Money, Mississippi. 4 days later, when bus driver James Blake told Rosa Parks to give up her seat, she refused, quote, she said, pushed as far as she could be pushed, end quote. She refused, pushed as far as she could be pushed. Now, this story is an excerpt from the Rosa Parks biography website by Jean Theo Harris, and it reads, Rosa Parks was sickened, angry, depressed, and horrified. she had been fighting for years to get justice for Black people. So Rosa Parks investigated sexual assaults on African-American women and also investigated cases where African-American men were accused of sexual assaults, things like this. She investigated lynchings, etc. So it's not like she was just a seamstress and then all of a sudden she refused to give up her seat on the bus. No, she had a long history of activism and civil rights activism. Rosa Parks was sickened, angry, depressed, horrified. She had been fighting for years to get justice for Black people under the law. Reese Taylor and Gertrude Perkins, who had been raped, Viola White and Claudette Colvin, who had been arrested for resisting on the bus. So people talk about Claudette Colvin refused to give up her seat 9 months before Rosa Parks, but Rosa Parks tried to get justice for Claudette Colvin, and there were others who refused to give up their seats as well. 4 African-American women made up the plaintiffs in the lawsuit of Browder versus Gale, filed February 1st, 1956 by attorney Fred Gray. Aurelia S. Browder, Claudette Colvin, Mary Louise Smith, and Susie McDonald. These were 4 African-American women who also refused to give up their seats on the bus. Okay, there was a number of people that did that. Even you go back to I think probably the year before, probably about 1954, Joanne Robinson, who headed up the Women's Political Council, which was one of the groups that helped to organize the Montgomery bus boycott. They were trying to change the laws of segregation on the buses also. But you have to understand, Alabama rewrote their state constitution in 1901 because Alabama had a Reconstruction Constitution in 1867, but that's going to be revoked after Reconstruction ends. Alabama rewrites their state constitution in 1901, and they write segregation into their state constitution. So what they wanted to do in Montgomery is to test the constitutionality of segregation, because they wanted to overthrow segregation and white supremacy and racism in Alabama altogether. But the ending segregation on the buses was the first step to do that. And this was after the Montgomery bus boycott is going to be after Brown versus Board of Education, U.S. Supreme Court case of 1954. In that U.S. Supreme Court case overturned Plessy versus Ferguson 1896. So the legal scholars and activists, they're thinking that they can get justice in the Supreme Court after the Brown versus Board of Education U.S. Supreme Court ruling. And they think that segregation on the buses is unconstitutional. So Rosa Parks sought protection for African Americans, and particularly Black men, from false charges like the Scottsboro boys and 16-year-old Jeremiah Reeves, a young Black minister that Raymond Parks, her husband, knew had been killed for appearing to make an advance at a white woman, as had their neighbor Hilliard Brooks for resisting on the bus. Rosa Parks was discouraged. Most of the cases just got swept under the rug. With Emmett Till, people had brought enough attention and an incredible amount of attention, so there had actually been a trial, and yet still Emmett Till's killers were acquitted. These men who had killed Emmett Till, 14 years old, went free. Okay. And now here you see in this picture, here you see Representative Charles Diggs from Michigan, okay? Representative Charles Diggs from Michigan, who was a congressman, okay, African-American congressman. And here you see Mamie Till, Emmett Till's mother, and you see Dr. T.R.M. Howard next to Mamie Till. You see Dr. T.R.M. Howard in the center. All right, so read the rest of this article as well. This is from the Zen Education Project, November 27th, 1955. Rosa Parks attends meeting about Emmett Till. All right, those watching on Facebook and YouTube, keep watching. We're out of time here on 910 AM Superstation WFDF. Those on Instagram, Michael Imhotep on Instagram, you keep watching on Instagram. Be sure to register for the online classes I teach on Saturdays and Sundays. If you like this type of information, these online classes I teach are going to blow you away. They're visual. I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. So even a year from now, after you register for the class, even a year from now, you can go back and watch the entire course. Visit AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. The class is on sale $60, regularly $130. Next class is Saturday, April 2nd, Sunday, April 3rd, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have a bundle pack. You can register for both classes for $100. You can email us at AHNshow at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AHNshow at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Also, if you have any questions, and if you've taken any of my online courses in the past, email me because you'll get a 50% discount. Okay, we have to get out of here. Remember, right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. And we'll talk to you tomorrow. Peace. Okay, stand by. We're going to go back to this clip here from the White House and the signing of the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Bill. I'm going to post a link here. You can register for the online class. As soon as you register, there's archived content. You can start watching. You can join us in class this weekend. All right. And Saturdays is Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So we deal with thousands of years of history and deal with what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. Then we deal with the transatlantic slave trade also. We deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors as well. All right. I want to go back to this clip here. Just a second here, because we're only on the radio station for an hour, so now I have to operate the boards. I'm running through a 12-channel mixer here, so now I have to operate everything. Okay, so let's go back to the White House today in the Rose Garden. This press conference took place, this signing of the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Bill and press conference.
Given just a little bit of oxygen, it comes roaring back out, screaming. What stops it is all of us, not a few. All of us have to stop it. People like Ida B. Wells, one of the founders of the NAACP, established 100 years ago in response to racial terror across the country. A brilliant, gifted writer. She exposed the barbaric nature of lynching as a tool to intimidate and subjugate Black Americans. In her words, her courage, her convictions, she was trying to prevent the murders of Emmett Till and Ahmaud Arbery, so many others, over 4,400 others. Ida B. Wells once said, quote, "The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon the wrongs." Turn the light of truth upon the wrongs. That's what all of you have done gathered in this Rose Garden, with this bill and so much more, including Ida B. Wells' great-granddaughter, Michelle Duster, whom I'm honored to introduce to mark this historic day. Michelle, welcome to the White House and welcome to the podium. As my mother would say, God love you, dear. All right. I didn't see you. I'm sorry.
I'm going to just take a moment to take in this because it has been a very long time. Thank you, President Biden, for that introduction and for your leadership in signing this bill into law. My brother Dan and I are honored to be here and represent our great-grandmother, Ida B. Wells Barnett, who once said, "Our country's national crime is lynching." She was born enslaved in 1862, Holly Springs, Mississippi, the same state where 14-year-old Emmett Till was lynched 93 years later. She became one of the first investigative and most prominent journalists and civil rights activists of her time. She carefully chronicled names, dates, locations, and excuses used to justify lynchings. She wrote articles and pamphlets and gave speeches about the atrocities. And it was personal to her because 3 of her enterprising friends, Thomas Moss, Will Stewart, and Calvin McDowell, who co-owned a grocery store in Memphis, were lynched in 1892. She knew these upstanding men, who were leaders in the community, they were guilty of no crime. Through her writing and speaking, she exposed uncomfortable truths that upset the status quo. Truths that lynching was being used as an excuse to terrorize the Black community in order to maintain a social and economic hierarchy based on race. And for that, her life was threatened, her printing press was destroyed, and she was exiled from the South. Despite losing everything, she continued to speak out across this country and Great Britain about the violence and terror of lynching. She eventually settled in Chicago, where I was born, and where Emmett Till was born. And in 1898, in response to the lynching of Postmaster Fraser Baker in Lake City, South Carolina, she visited President William S. McKinley right here in Washington to urge him to make lynching a federal crime. Since my great-grandmother's visit to the White House 124 years ago, there have been over 200 attempts to get legislation enacted.
Over 200
And
attempts.
17 years ago, in 2005, my brother Dan spoke at the Senate press conference where they issued an apology for not passing the legislation. But we finally stand here today, generations later, to witness this historic moment of President Biden signing the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Bill into law. We are here today because of the tenacity of the civil rights leaders and commitment of members of Congress who are here today. And because of someone who was instrumental in this bill when she was a senator, and someone my great-grandmother would especially be proud of. It is my humble honor to introduce the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris.
Good job.
Okay, so that was Ida B. Wells' great-granddaughter,
All good.
Michelle Duncan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Michelle, thank you for your powerful words. I was so glad that we had some time in the Oval Office with the President to talk with you about the historic day that we are celebrating, but on the shoulders of so many, including your family and you who have written about it, maintaining your family's legacy of speaking truth always. So thank you. It's good to see everybody. President Biden, members of Congress, I have to shout out to the CBC, to my fellow Americans, thank you all. So lynching, well, we know it's a stain on the history of our nation. Since our founding, and in particular, in the century following the Civil War, thousands of people in states across our nation were tortured and murdered by vigilantes. They were dragged from their homes. They had ropes wrapped around their necks. They were hanged, burned, drowned, and dismembered. Often, as the President said, as their families were forced to watch, and as crowds gathered to spectate. These lynchings were motivated, of course, by racism, and meant to cause terror. They were acts committed to secure political and social control. But they were not designated crimes by the federal government. Lynching was not considered a crime by the federal government. Legislation to make lynching a federal crime was first introduced in the United States Congress in the year 1900. It failed. In the 122 years since, anti-lynching legislation has been introduced to the United States Congress more than 200 times, advanced by leaders such as James Weldon Johnson of the NAACP, and of course, the phenomenal Ida B. Wells. Those who courageously knew what had to be done and were undeterred. And when we speak of Ida B. Wells, let's understand the courageous nature of that incredible American who used her skill, her profession, her calling as a journalist, as President Biden noted, to help open the eyes of our nation to the terror of lynching, which speaks, of course, to the role that we have known also historically. I'm going off script for a moment, about the importance of the Black press and the importance of making sure that we have the storytellers always in our community who we will support to tell the truth when no one else is willing to tell it. And so those heroes who petitioned every president from McKinley to Hoover to support federal legislation. Anti-lynching legislation was introduced in the wake of some of these most brutal attacks. After the murder of Mary Turner in 1918, after the murder of Emmett Till in 1955, and James Byrd Jr. in 1998, and James Craig Anderson in 2011. And it failed again and again. And again and again, anti-lynching legislation was reintroduced in the United States Congress by leaders who understood that our past must not and cannot be forgotten, that the truth must be spoken no matter how difficult it is to speak, and certainly no matter how difficult it is to hear. Leaders who understood that the victims of lynching and their families and all of our society deserve that we recognize the crimes and the injustice of what was occurring, and that the people of our nation deserve the protection of a federal anti-lynching law. When I served in the United States Senate, it was a profound honor to sponsor, with Cory Booker, the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act. And I want to say a thing about Cory Booker. I'm going to talk about him in front of his face. Cory Booker, I have had the privilege of working with, and he is a man of uncommon courage, unmatched moral clarity, and an unwavering commitment to doing what is right. Thank you, Cory Booker. And I also want to recognize and thank Senator Tim Scott, whose partnership, of course, helped us pass this legislation, and with Congressman Bobby Rush. Where is he? There you are. Who kept this fight alive for so many years in the United States Congress. Congressman Rush, you have dedicated your career to guiding our nation toward justice, and I thank you. And thank you to so many other leaders who are gathered here who helped us reach this very important day. Leaders who witnessed the brutal reality of lynching, such as Ollie Gordon and Reverend Wheeler Parker, cousins of Emmett Till, for whom the stories of these crimes are not lines in a history book, but vivid memories. So today we are gathered to do unfinished business, to acknowledge the horror in this part of our history, to state unequivocally that lynching is and has always been a hate crime, and to make clear that the federal government may now prosecute these crimes as such. Lynching is not a relic of the past. Racial acts of terror still occur in our nation. And when they do, we must all have the courage to name them and hold the perpetrators to account. And with that, I'll close by saying this. I believe that so often, and it has been said, the victims of lynching were targeted. And let's be clear about this, because they were working to build a better America. That's what they were doing. It was in everybody's best interest what they were doing. But unfortunately, the cowards couldn't see, didn't understand Those folks who were killed, they were business owners, creating economic opportunity in their community by which all would prosper and benefit. They were teachers, educating the next generation of America's leaders. They were activists who were defending the sacred freedom to vote. So today, as we recognize them, as we recognize our history, let us also be here gathered to recommit ourselves to that unfinished business as well, to continuing to fight for freedom, for opportunity, and justice for all. May God bless you, and may God bless America. Thank you all.
Great job.
Okay, so that was at the White House today. How many of you all saw that earlier today? That took place March 29th, 2022, the signing of the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Bill. I shared the broadcast live when it on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, when it took place. It's not only historic, it's important. Okay, we've been trying for 122 years to get a federal anti-lynching bill passed, going back to Representative George Henry White, Republican from North Carolina, who was the only African American in the House of Representatives in 1900, because the other ones have been voted out of office after the state constitutions were changed and the poll taxes and literacy tests were imposed. Okay, so very quickly, also check out this piece here on Ida B. Wells. And this is, I deal with all this, a lot of this information we talk about in my class I teach on Sundays from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. But this piece here from PBS.org, this deals with Ida B. Wells and how she got involved in the anti-lynching movement. And it deals, they talked about here at the White House, you heard Michelle Duster, who's the great granddaughter of Ida B. Wells. And you heard her talk about the Moss store, Tom Moss and the Moss store murders, 1892, Memphis, Tennessee. That's how Ida B. Wells got involved in the anti-lynching movement. And her newspaper office was destroyed. She ended up having to leave Memphis, Tennessee to save her life. She ended up going to Chicago. But if we look at this here quickly, let me see here. We've got it open up in, okay. So this is from PBS.org, The Rise and Fall of Jim Crow. Ida B. Wells forced out of Memphis, 1892. So in 1892, Ida B. Wells, a journalist and former Memphis school teacher, started a crusade against lynching after 3 friends of hers were brutally murdered by a Memphis mob. 3 friends of hers were brutally murdered by a Memphis mob. Tom Moss and 2 of his friends, Calvin McDowell and Henry Stewart, were arrested for defending themselves against an attack on Tom Moss' store. He owned a grocery store called the People's Grocery Store, okay? And he was a successful African-American businessman. Tom Moss was a highly respected figure in the African-American community. He was a postman as well as the owner of a grocery store. A white competitor who was enraged that Tom Moss had drawn away his African-American customers, hired some off-duty deputy sheriffs to destroy Tom Moss's grocery store. Tom Moss and his friends did not know that the men were deputies. So rightfully, they resisted because we own guns and we fought back, contrary to popular belief. We fought back. So a gun battle broke out and several deputies were wounded. And one of the things I deal with in the classes I teach, because the way the civil rights movement is taught, as a nonviolent movement, and that's not true. Because Professor James Small has told me personally that the civil rights movement was not a nonviolent movement. If you read this book right here by Professor Charles E. Cobb Jr., this nonviolent stuff that gets you killed, how guns made the civil rights movement possible. This nonviolent stuff that gets you killed, how guns made the civil rights movement possible, by Professor Charles E. Cobb Jr. Professor Charles E. Cobb Jr. was a field secretary for SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, for 5 years in rural Mississippi. So he's there in Mississippi, and he was there organizing African Americans to register to vote, which was very, very dangerous work in Mississippi, in the South period, but especially Mississippi. Because like I said, Mississippi had the most number of lynchings from 1882 to 1968. It had 581 lynchings. Okay, so and in this book, they talk about how it was African Americans with guns who protected the best they could civil rights workers and civil rights activists and those who were marching and things like this. And a lot of the civil rights leaders that we hear about, a lot of them own guns. Dr. King owned guns until Bayard Rustin convinced him to get rid of his guns. Dr. King tried to get a concealed pistol license in Montgomery, Alabama, because Montgomery is the capital of Alabama. He tried to get a concealed pistol license in Montgomery, Alabama in 1956 during the Montgomery bus boycott. Dr. King's house was firebombed twice in 1956, once in late January and then again in September 1956. So Rosa Parks and Raymond Parks, they own guns. Medgar Evers, Fannie Lou Hamer, Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth. When you go study this history, all those people own guns. All right. And this is before the Deacons for Defense and Justice were founded in 1964. Okay, so if you go back to this piece here quickly on Ida B. Wells, right here. So Tom Moss and his two friends, so a gun battle broke out and several deputies were wounded. Tom Moss and his two friends and 100 other African-American supporters were arrested. Tom Moss, his two friends, and 100 other African-American supporters were arrested. Several nights later, masked vigilantes dragged Tom Moss and his two friends from their jail cells, took them to a deserted railroad yard, and shot them to death. Okay. Lynching does not mean being hung by a rope. Lynching means extrajudicial killings. Okay. So these two were lynched. They weren't hung by a rope, but they were lynched. They were taken out of jail. These were extrajudicial killings. They were killed by a mob. Enraged by their deaths, Ida B. Wells lashed out at the refusal of Memphis police to arrest the well-known killers. People knew, these people were well-known who did it. Enraged by their deaths, Ida B. Wells lashed out at the refusal of Memphis police to arrest the well-known killers. She encouraged African Americans to protest with boycotts of white-owned stores and public transportation, redistribute the pain through targeted, sustained economic withdrawal strategies. Today, many of us don't understand that concept. We understood this back then. You withdraw economic support and continue to redirect your dollars to African-American-owned businesses. This is what Dr. King said April 3rd, 1968 in his last speech, I've been to the mountaintop. He didn't just come to that realization then. Dr. King has been talking about economic empowerment for years and economic withdrawal strategies. Medgar Evers used economic boycotts. Adam Clayton Powell Jr. You go to 1960, Nashville, Tennessee, economic boycott of the downtown business district. to break the back of segregation in Nashville, Tennessee. That's John Lewis and Diane Nash and Reverend C.T. Vivian and others. And then that economic boycott spread to 59 cities across the country, and African Americans up north were boycotting Woolworths and Kresge and the chain stores up north that African Americans in the South were being discriminated against. Okay, if you watch Eyes on the Prize, you watch the third installment, 1960 to 61, called Ain't Scared of Your Jails. They deal with this in Eyes on the Prize. See, a people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. And what you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. This is why we have to reclaim African history and culture. Our history and culture influences our economic empowerment and our political empowerment. We have to have a synthesis of all of this. So the lynchings were a turning point in Ida B. Wells' life. She began to investigate and reveal the real motivations that lay behind lynching. Like many middle-class African Americans, Ida B. Wells had accepted the myth that only poor African Americans were lynched for heinous crimes. Okay, she accepted the myth that only poor African Americans were lynched for heinous crimes. But Ida B. Wells was now shocked into recognizing that even innocent middle-class African Americans could be targets of lynching. As Ida B. Wells investigated the reasons for lynching, she discovered that a number of victims were lynched not for rape, but for having sexual relations with consenting white women. So in investigating numerous lynchings, Ida B. Wells discovered that a lot of the cases of lynching that were said to be an African-American man raping a white woman, they found out it was consensual sex between a white woman and an African-American man. And then her husband found out, her brother found out, her father found out, what have you, and they lynched the African-American man. But it was consensual sex. All right, so Ida B. Wells wrote in her newspaper, quote, "Nobody in this section of the community believes that old threadbare lie that Negro men rape white women. If Southern men are not careful, a conclusion might be reached which will be very damaging to the moral reputation of their women." Okay? If Southern men are not careful, a conclusion might be reached. The conclusion reached is that white women desire black men more than they desire white men. Now, the suggestion that white women would willingly have sexual relations with black men enraged white people in Memphis, Tennessee, especially white men. Since Ida B. Wells did not sign her name to her editorials, the white press assumed a man had written the article. Now, the white newspaper there in Memphis, at least one of them, was called the Memphis Scimitar, Scimitar. The Memphis Scimitar advocated a violent response to this article that Ida B. Wells wrote. The Memphis Scimitar printed, quote, "It will be the duty of those whom he has attacked to tie the wretch to a stake," like a stake in the ground, stake, to a stake, "brand him in the forehead with a hot iron, and perform upon him a surgical operation with a pair of shears," end quote. They're talking about castrating an African-American man. They printed this in the white newspaper there in 1892. Now, a mob destroyed Ida B. Wells' newspaper while Ida B. Wells was out of town. Forced to remain in the North, Ida B. Wells launched a national crusade against lynching that would capture the attention of the nation and Europe. And she's going to get involved in the anti-lynching movement. We know that she's going to be a co-founder in 1909 of the NAACP. We know she was in the she was a member, if I remember correctly, she was a member of the Afro-American Council, also Afro-American Council 1898. And then you're going to have members of the Afro-American Council that leave, and they're going to form the Niagara Movement in 1905. Dr. W.B. Du Bois and others, William Monroe Trotter. And then she's going to be a co-founder of the NAACP as well in 1909. Okay, so that's some background history on Ida B. Wells Barnett. Forced out of Memphis, Tennessee in 1892. So check that out at pbs.org. All right. We'll talk some more about the anti-lynching bill probably on Wednesday's show. I want to get to this other story because we're over time, and I want to get to this other story here. This is dealing with the Whoopi Goldberg. There was an article that I posted from the Independent. The independent.co.uk back March 24th. Whoopi Goldberg demands an apology from the royal family. Okay, this coincided with their tour of the Caribbean and Central America. Okay, and let me pull this up here. This article right here. So as we talked about last week, Prince William and Kate Middleton were touring different countries in the Central America and the Caribbean to commemorate the 70th anniversary of Prince William's grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, 70 years on the throne. Okay. So we talked about this last week. And you had Jamaicans who were, before he came to Jamaica, because one of the places they went was Jamaica. Okay. And we know she's still head of state of Jamaica. The monarch, she's still head of state of Jamaica. Jamaica is starting the process to separate from Great Britain and remove Queen Elizabeth as the head of state. But this piece right here from the Independent, Whoopi Goldberg demands apology from royal family for slavery. Okay, and I'm gonna let you hear some of what happened. But as we talked about last week, you had, and there was a piece from the Huffington Post, you had Jamaicans who are demanding an apology for reparations. I mean, apology for slavery, and they're demanding reparations. And you have Prince William, who expressed remorse for slavery, but stopped short of an apology. I'm going to pull this article up here. Go to this one here just a second. Okay, I'll pull this piece up here from Huffington Post also. Let's see, where is this? So there was a piece, Jamaican leaders shun Prince William, Kate Middleton visit, demand slavery reparations. So I saw their trip to Belize. And I was watching it on MSNBC late one night. and MSNBC started carrying Sky News from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. Don't ask me how I know. Sky News from the UK, and they showed Prince William and Kate in Belize, and almost all the people that they showed them coming in contact with were of African descent. They're dark-skinned African people. So March 22nd, this article came out from Huffington Post. Let me close these ads out. Okay. March 22nd, this article came out from Huffington Post. Jamaican leaders shun Prince William, Kate Middleton visit, demand slavery reparations. A group of 100 well-known figures accused the British royal family of perpetuating the greatest human rights tragedy in the history of humankind. The greatest human rights tragedy in the history of humankind. All right. So this came out March 22nd. And then this was when they were on their way to Jamaica. They were in Jamaica on Wednesday, March 23rd. They also celebrated the legacy of Bob Marley while they were there in Jamaica as well. And if we look at this here quickly, dozens of well-known leaders in Jamaica, including professors and politicians, are demanding an apology and slavery reparations, demanding an apology and slavery reparations as the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge prepare for a trip to the former British colony. So even though Jamaica has declared their independence, Queen Elizabeth II is still head of state. And they're making preparations to separate from Great Britain and remove Queen Elizabeth II as head of state, as Barbados did back in, I think it was November of 2021. The group is rejecting the visit of Prince William and Kate scheduled for Tuesday, part of a larger trip to the Caribbean region that coincides with the 60th anniversary of Jamaica's independence and the 70th anniversary of the coronation of Queen Elizabeth. And let me pull this up. Let me need to go and put this in. Where is... Okay. Hold on just a second. I want to change the title. All right. Okay, so the group is rejecting the visit of Prince William and Kate scheduled for Tuesday, March 22nd, part of a larger trip to the Caribbean region that coincides with the 60th anniversary of Jamaica's independence and the 70th anniversary of the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. Quote, "We see no reason to celebrate 70 years of the ascension of your grandmother to the British throne because her leadership and that of her predecessors have perpetuated the greatest human rights tragedy in the history of humankind," end quote, read a letter published Sunday ahead of the couple's visit and signed by 100 Jamaican leaders. So that was Sunday, March 20th, that the letter was published. The week-long royal tour of Central America and the Caribbean that began on Saturday, March 19th, was taken at the behest of Queen Elizabeth II, who is William's grandmother. The trip aims to strengthen Britain's ties with Commonwealth countries, but this trip is off to a rocky start and comes as some countries consider cutting ties to the British monarchy, like the Eastern Caribbean island of Barbados did in November of 2021. Local opposition forced the royal couple to cancel a visit to a farm in Belize that was planned on Saturday, March 19th, while the upcoming trip to Jamaica has angered some who say they are still waiting for an apology and slavery reparations. Still waiting for an apology and slavery reparations. Okay, so read the rest of this piece here. Okay, and then I want to go to this clip here from The View. Now, this is from Entertainment Tonight. And let me cue this up just a second here. This is from I think this is Entertainment Tonight UK or something. But you're going to also hear Prince William, and he did not offer an apology, but he expressed great remorse. He did not offer an apology, but he expressed great remorse. So there's a piece from the Associated Press from Wednesday, March 23rd, of them actually in Jamaica. He expressed profound sorrow. It's interesting how they'll go out of their way not to apologize for slavery, because they know if they apologize, that opens up the door for reparations. And let me see. This is here. This is from Associated Press. I'll try to pull this article up. Let's go to this clip here. Just a second. Let's go to this clip here from The View. All right.
Now to Whoopi Goldberg, who is calling out the royal family to apologize for their colonial past.
Yes, while discussing Prince William and Kate Middleton's...
This is from Entertainment Tonight Canada.
Now to Whoopi Goldberg, who is calling out the royal family to apologize for their colonial past.
Yes, while discussing Prince William and Kate Middleton's Caribbean tour on Wednesday's episode of The View, Whoopi said that the modern royal family should apologize for its imperialist past and the British Empire's links to slavery.
We cannot ignore the fact that Britain ran ramshod over India for years.
They enslaved Indians as well.
Created all kinds. Yeah, that's why I'm saying let us not forget when we talk about what needs to happen, all the folks that need to apologize. And you know, listen, this is not new. And I suspect Charles, when he was in Barbados, had some idea, because he went on and apologized as he was releasing the hold that Britain has. So perhaps somebody's listening, and it's the new group of folks. You know, Charles is, I don't know if it's Charles or William, one of them.
Now, Whoopi's comments came not long after Prince William spoke about the appalling atrocity of slavery in Jamaica at the state dinner.
I strongly agree with my father, the Prince of Wales, who said in Barbados last year that the appalling atrocity of slavery forever stains our history. I want to express my profound sorrow. Slavery was abhorrent, and it should never have happened.
Yeah, an apology, like we were talking about before, is like the least that they could do.
The very least.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so neither one of them apologized. Just to be clear, Prince Charles didn't apologize either, and his son Prince William expressed profound sorrow, said it shouldn't have happened, appalling atrocity, all this. Neither one of them apologized. Don't confuse profound sorrow and it should not have happened and slavery was abhorrent with an apology. There's not an apology. Neither one of them apologized. Okay, so if we go to I'm going to pull up this other article here. We talked about this last week. Prince William expresses sorrow for slavery in Jamaica visit. This is from the Associated Press. Okay, let's pull this up here. This is from March 24th, 2022. All right, this one right here. Okay, Prince William has expressed profound sorrow for slavery during a visit to Jamaica, though he stopped short of offering an apology demanded by protesters who are also seeking reparations for Britain's role in the slave trade. So I know that in the clip from ET Canada, they make it seem like he apologized. He didn't apologize. And neither did his daddy. When Barbados cut ties with Great Britain in November, we covered it here. We talked about it. Prince Charles spoke. Prince Charles didn't apologize either. Now, William, second in line to the throne, made the comments while addressing a dinner in Kingston, Jamaica's capital. He echoed the words of his father, the Prince of Wales, who described the slave trade as an appalling atrocity during a visit to Barbados last year when the Caribbean nation severed its ties to the British Crown and became a republic. Okay? Prince Charles called the slave trade an appalling atrocity. He did not apologize either. Prince William said, quote, "I want to express my profound sorrow. Slavery was abhorrent and should never have happened." Okay, we didn't need you to go to Jamaica to say that. We already know that. That's still not an apology. The Prince Harry and Prince William and his wife, the Duchess of Cambridge, Kate Middleton, are on a week-long trip to Belize, Jamaica, and the Bahamas, designed to strengthen Britain's ties with the Commonwealth nations as Queen Elizabeth II marks 70 years on the throne. Jamaican Prime Minister Andrew Holness said earlier on Wednesday, March 24th, that his country intends to sever ties to the monarchy and become fully independent. Definitely. Definitely. Sever ties with, I don't want to curse on the show, but yeah. Yeah. You need to sever ties with her. With the, and this is why I call them colonizers, because you heard Whoopi Goldberg talk about India. 100 years ago, 1/5 of the world population lived under British rule because Great Britain colonized 1/5 of the world population. This is why I call them colonizers. Queen Elizabeth II is William's grandmother. She remains, Queen Elizabeth II remains the head of state for Jamaica and 13 other countries that were once British colonies. This is all dealing with understanding history. Okay. Britain's legacy as Jamaica's colonial ruler during the era of enslaved African labor is still controversial. Prince William said anniversaries such as the International Day of Remembrance of the victims of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade, which was March 25th, which was last Friday, March 25th, provide a moment for reflection. So this is, okay, so you're going to reflect. So, William, you're going to reflect on slavery and express your profound sorrow, but you don't want to talk about reparations. International Day of Remembrance of Victims of Slavery and the Transatlantic Slave Trade. That was created by United Nations. Okay, that's something that we need. We talked about this here on the show last week. That's something important. But how's the colonizer going to participate in the celebration, remembering the victims of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade, but you, on behalf of the British Crown, don't want to apologize for the transatlantic slave trade and apologize for Great Britain's role in the transatlantic slave trade, and you don't even want to have a discussion about reparations? Read the rest of this article here. We talked about this last week. Prince William expresses sorrow for slavery in Jamaica visit. Now, if we go back to this piece quickly here from The Independent, so somebody asked the question, why should they apologize for something? Well, let me ask you a question. Why the hell did Great Britain pay reparations to 46,000 goddamn slave owners, but didn't pay reparations to the 800,000 Africans who they enslaved? Now, you answer that question for me. Whoopi Goldberg demands apology from royal family for slavery. Okay, so we dealt with okay, let's close this out here. This ad. Get past this. I'll try later. Close this ad out. All right. So the 66-year-old actor and presenter said on The View, we cannot ignore the fact that Britain ran roughshod over India for years. It's true. Okay. Okay, I got the most important part of this here. So check that out also. This is why it's important to understand history, because Great Britain raped Africa, the Caribbean, Jamaica, Nigeria, Kenya. Okay, Great Britain, they were the biggest colonizers. This is how they got a lot of the wealth that they got, by colonizing and enslaving African people. Jamaica was conquered in 1494 by Columbus, but then fell into the hands of Great Britain. Barbados, colonized by Great Britain. They set up sugarcane plantations, created untold wealth for Great Britain. If you look at this piece here, so The Guardian has an article dealing with, and see, in my online classes, we get into this history. The Guardian has this article dealing with Jamaica demanding reparations. And this is from, I think, 2015, when British Prime Minister David Cameron was going to Jamaica. this one, okay, so Jamaica calls for reparations. There's another one here. From The Guardian. Jamaica calls for Britain to pay billions of pounds in reparations. And Jamaica issues apology. Okay, if we look at this one, let me see. That's not the one I want. The one on, well, we can look at this one here from AtlantaBlackStar.com. This deals with Great Britain paying 46,000 slave owners for their enslaved Africans when Great Britain abolished slavery in 1833. But they didn't provide compensation for the Africans who were enslaved. This is why May 19th, 2018, when Meghan Markle married into the family of colonizers and African Americans watched the quote unquote royal wedding and got teary eyed. This is why I did my video that said Black people watched the royal wedding, but forgot about the history, but forgot about the British involvement in slavery, because a lot of the opulence and wealth that you saw displayed was built on the backs and the exploitation of enslaved African people. Britain compensated 46,000 slave owners, but will not pay slavery reparations. David Cameron builds, so David Cameron was the prime minister back in 2015. David Cameron builds Jamaican prison instead. This is from September 30th, 2015 from AtlantaBlackStar.com. This dealt with David Cameron's visit to Jamaica, and the Jamaicans were demanding then an apology for slavery and demanding reparations, because Jamaica has never recovered from being conquered by the Spanish in 1494 and being colonized and raped by the British. There's another article from The Guardian. This one right here from The Guardian. We talked about this last week. Jamaica should move on from painful legacy of slavery, David Cameron says. So if we look at this here briefly, then I have to get out of here. If you all like this type of information, you support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. You register for the online courses that I teach at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, because we get deep into this information also. Okay. This helps support the African History Network. All right. If we look at this briefly here, British Prime Minister in 2015, he was the British Prime Minister, David Cameron, is headed to Jamaica, where he would discuss trade with the island nation and former British colony and address Parliament. Despite calls that the UK pay billions of dollars in reparations to Jamaica for the horrors of slavery, David Cameron reportedly will have none of it. Okay. Let me see. Okay, if we go back, okay, Sir Hillary Beckles, chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission and vice chancellor of the University of the West Indies, urged David Cameron, quote, play its part in cleaning up the monumental mess of the empire, end quote, the British Empire, as many Caribbean nations are overwhelmed from the inherited mess of slavery and colonialism. And that's putting it politely. We go and look at down here, they talk about in March 2014, CARICOM unanimously approved a 10-point plan for slavery reparations. In its preamble, the plan asserts that European governments were owners and traders of enslaved Africans, instructed genocidal actions upon indigenous communities, created the legal, financial, and fiscal policies necessary for the enslavement of African people, defined and enforced African enslavement and native genocide as in their, quote, national interests. Okay. This is what the Europeans did, defined and enforced African enslavement and native genocide as in their, quote unquote, national interests, refused compensation to the enslaved with the ending of their enslavement, compensated slave owners at emancipation for the loss of legal property rights in enslaved Africans. So Dr. Robert Beckford, a British academic theologian, calculated that Great Britain extracted an estimated 4 trillion pounds from the Caribbean in unpaid labor, 2.5 trillion pounds in unjust enrichment to the British economy, and an additional 1 trillion pounds in pain and suffering, according to the Jamaica Observer. This amounts to a total of 7.5 trillion pounds, of which Jamaica is owed 30.6%, or 2.3 trillion. Okay, 2.3 trillion pounds, which is in US dollars 3.5 trillion pounds, $3.5 trillion. When Great Britain abolished slavery officially in 1833, it provided reparations not for the slaves, but 17 billion pounds in compensation to the 46,000 British slave owners. The compensation of Britain's 46,000 slave owners was the largest bailout in the country's history until the 2009 bank bailout, notes TheGuardian.com. And slave ownership was far more common than has been presumed. Okay, the 800,000 African slaves who were freed were not compensated. So read this article here. Britain compensated 46,000 slave owners, but would not pay slavery reparations. David Cameron builds Jamaican prison instead. Now, this is from September 30th, 2015. Then you look at the article from TheGuardian.com from 2015, also September 30th, 2015. You look at this piece from The Guardian. Jamaica should move on from painful legacy of slavery. This is what David Cameron, who was the Prime Minister of Great Britain, said in 2015 when he was planning the trip to Jamaica. See, it's easy to move on when you have something to move with. It's easy to say, oh, why should we pay reparations? Because you got our stuff. That's why. You built your empire on the exploitation of African people. And Africa has never been the same. The Caribbean has never been the same. Jamaica should move on from painful legacy of slavery, says David Cameron. British Prime Minister ducks official calls for UK to apologize for its role in the slave trade or pay reparations. So when people say, well, why should Great Britain pay reparations to the African countries that they enslaved and exploited and raped. Well, why the hell did Great Britain pay reparations to 46,000 slave owners when the slaves were free? And taxpayers in Great Britain were paying for that. David Cameron has called for Jamaica and the UK to move on from the deep wounds caused by slavery, but ducked official calls for Great Britain to apologize for its role or pay reparations. Speaking to the Caribbean countries' parliament, the prime minister at the time in 2015 struck a defiant note as he spoke of his pride that Britain played a part in abolishing the aborted slave trade. Well, Britain got involved in the slave trade back in about 1562. And when Britain comes in, they're going to dominate the transatlantic slave trade. He spoke of his pride that Britain had played a part in abolishing the aborted slave trade, that Britain dominated. Portuguese dominate for the first 200 years. The Portuguese get involved in 1441. When Great Britain gets involved, when they really get involved, they're going to take over and they dominate the transatlantic slave trade. So he spoke of his pride without highlighting Britain's historic involvement in the transfer of slaves from West Africa and ownership of slaves in the Caribbean. David Cameron called for Great Britain and Jamaica to move on from this painful legacy and continue to build for the future. Well, it's easy to build for the future when you got something to build with. It's easy to move on when you have something to move with. His trade trip to Jamaica, the first for 14 years by a UK prime minister, has been overshadowed by slavery. David Cameron was warmly received by a military band playing God Save the Queen on arrival at the airport and received a hug from the country's prime minister, Portia Simpson Miller. However, during the trip, high-profile politicians and campaigns drew attention to a distant relative of David Cameron's, General Sir James Duff, who was compensated for losing 202 Jamaican slaves in 1833 when Great Britain abolished slavery. So why the hell did Great Britain pay Sir James Duff for freeing 202 Jamaican slaves, but they didn't give reparations to the slaves whose labor was exploited? David Cameron was also pressed to atone for slavery personally and on behalf of the UK by Bert Samuels, a member of the National Reparations Commission, and Portia Simpson Miller publicly raised the issue of compensation after their bilateral talks. In response, David Cameron initially did not address the issue of reparations or an apology, telling the UK media he was in the country to talk about trade and the future. Well, you can't deal with the future till you rectify the past and the maldistribution of wealth, power, and resources. But speaking to the National Parliament in Kingston, Jamaica, he made clear the UK wanted to draw a line under the legacy of slavery. He said, while there is indeed much to celebrate about our past, it would be wrong. It would be wrong to do so while ignoring the most painful aspects of it, a period which would never be forgotten and from which history has drawn the bitterest of lessons. He said slavery was and is abhorrent in all forms. It has no place whatsoever in any civilized society, and Britain is proud to have eventually led the way in its abolition. That the Caribbean has emerged from the long shadow it cast is testament to the resilience and spirit of its people. I acknowledge that these wounds run very deep indeed, but I do hope that as friends, this is what the Prime Minister of Great Britain told the descendants of Africans who were enslaved and exploited and raped by Great Britain. He said, but I do hope that as friends who have gone through so much together since those darkest of times, we can move on from this painful legacy and continue to build for the future. Read the rest of this. This was in 2015. All right, that's going to do it. That's going to do it for us. Check that out. If you like this type of information, be sure to register for the online classes I teach on Saturdays and Sundays. Saturdays is ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, we deal with we go through a timeline of history. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips, all of that. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You go back and watch it anytime. You don't have to be present in class. Doesn't matter where you're working, what have you. As soon as we finish, the class is archived. You can go and watch it. Okay. After you register, you have full access to the class. So even a year from now, you can go back and watch the class. All right. So that's on our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. I'm going to post a link here again. As soon as you register, you can watch the classes we did this past weekend. And you can join us in class this weekend. We also have a bundle pack where you can register for both classes for $100. Okay, we'll post a link here also. And then on Saturday, also teach Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization. This is a 2-week class. Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization. So we deal with some well-known and not so well-known African women in our history. And that's at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com also. So we deal with profiles on, we deal with some of the history of great African women in history from all different time periods, from antiquity to African deities to revolutionaries, abolitionists, civil rights movement, scientists, doctors, all different time periods. Great African women in history, the mothers of civilization. So we actually started that class April 2nd. Okay, so it's April 2nd, and it's March 26th, April 2nd, and then we're going to add a third session to that. So that class is $25. Great African Women in History. All right, we have to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Peace. Be sure to follow us on Instagram also. Michael Imhotep on Instagram, IMHOTEP, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Peace.